You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Reeling, as we all are, at the fact that the Supreme Court went and did it. They actually had the gall to do it. They overthrew Roe v. Wade. Not that we weren't expecting this, because we were. Not that we won't be ready for this, because we are and will continue to be. But we'll need to fortify ourselves, and I'll address this later in the program, because this will be an even longer battle than we had anticipated. Yet it is one we must fight, and one we will win. So, we have a special show for you today, because it's the last show of this season. Oh, we'll be back in the autumn, not to worry, and it's a midterm year for elections as well, so we'll all need to be as rested and fresh as possible for that, which in turn means that you deserve a rip-roaring send-off for the summer, and that we have for you in today's program. My special guest for the conversation, returning to the program in her ever-brilliant, sane, lucid, educative of us, wise fashion, is the great Anita Hill, professor of law and general all-round terrific person. Because she always leaves me in such a positive state of mind, one of those, yes, we can mindsets, we're going to close with a list that's incomplete, although it may be, but of good news things that have happened in recent times to put you in the right mood for summer. But before we do any of that, we need to go inside the headlines. Okay, inside the hearings. I don't know about you, but I have been glued to the TV every chance I get for the January 6th Conspiracy and Insurrection Congressional Hearings, or if I can't see them live because life intervenes, I catch them on reruns at night. Now, I grant that I'm a news junkie, and I've been known to do this regularly with the Watergate hearings way back, with the Oliver North hearings, the Supreme Court Justice nomination hearings, Hill Thomas, the impeachment hearings, etc., ad nauseum. They do make for amazing drama, and they're very revealing about the ways in which our government operates. I wish that Supreme Court cases were televised as well. I think it's an amazement, a privilege, and it should be a right to see our system at work. These current hearings are unusual in a number of ways. We have never before had to deal with such a serious threat of violent insurrection to our republic. We have never before faced such an insurrection, encouraged, fostered, and even openly organized by a sitting president. We have never before seen legally subpoenaed witnesses flatly refuse to testify and openly invite citations of contempt of Congress. And we have never before seen the Republican congressional leadership throw a tantrum worthy of a 2-year-old — oh, sorry, I didn't mean to insult 2-year-olds — and decide to take his marbles and go home and sulk, to mix my metaphors, like Achilles in his tent. The minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, huffed that if he couldn't have Jim Jordan in shirt sleeves shouting at everybody, and the extreme right-wing caucus of his party, the same caucus that gives him indigestion, bullying everyone on the hearings panel to disrupt it, he wouldn't have anybody there at all. So there. So he didn't. Of course, he was not counting on Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, which means that there were in fact 2 Republicans on the committee. He was also not counting on the fact that the major witnesses the committee has called are, in fact, pretty much all Republicans, some of them even Trumpist Republicans, some of those even fairly high-placed advisors to Trump. So, personally speaking, I have given up on wringing my hands with worry that the Republicans whine that the panel is one-sided. That was their decision, and they'll live with it. They'll have to live with it. What's more, this decision made for an orderly, civil, fair laying out of factual data. And it was done so almost totally by high and mid-level, extremely conservative Republicans. And a word about Cheney and Kissinger while we're on the subject. I have to say that they have both acquitted themselves superbly. It's also true that they are actually simply just doing their jobs. Also, he's not going to run again. And there's no reason for us to fall on the floor in gratitude to them for just doing that job. Nevertheless, they've had to put up with the loss of leadership positions in their party and their caucus and in the House of Representatives, and with death threats and other punishments the Trumpists see fit to lower on them. Cheney, in particular. She's got it in the teeth. So I guess the upshot is that even though they're simply doing their job like principled Congress people should, they deserve some praise and support for doing precisely that. Meanwhile, the panel seems to be focused on unearthing Trump's deep and intimate involvement in plans to put forth fake electors and to bully election officials in various states, even unto violent threats. The connective lines are blatantly being exposed, ones that run between these local people up through the middle henchmen, and then further on up through the Rudy Giulianis and Eastmans and other sycophants, to nestle right in the lap of Trump himself. They're not just evident, they're brazen. And guess what? What we've been hoping for has finally begun to happen. Where are all the principled Republicans? The answer is they're testifying before the January 6th assault on the Capitol Congressional Committee. And what's more, they're telling the truth. This takes some courage. I also started out feeling critical of the Democrats because they held the one big primetime debut coverage of the hearings, and then they dropped it off the map for almost a week. Furthermore, they're doling out hearings in a rather parsimonious manner. I felt that they should be all in a row like good little ducks, so that we hear these stories again and again and again, day after day. That was how it had been done in the Watergate hearings, and I guess I was still fighting yesterday's war. But I've changed, and now I think actually that the Democrats made a wise decision in spacing out the hearings. I think interest, even hunger, is growing. Besides, there's such a wealth of information that we need time to absorb and digest it before moving on to be inundated by the next batch. So let it take time. Let it stretch into July. Let it stretch right up until Election Day, as far as I'm concerned, so that people will understand just who and what it is they're voting for. I know that most Americans are not watching the hearings, at least not gavel to gavel, certainly, and certainly not the MAGA maniacs or the Proud Boys. But a lot of people are, and for everyone who then does a double take and rethinks loyalty to Trump, and for everyone who has been lukewarm on Biden without really thinking that through, our democracy is safer and more solid. And that's just what we need it to be. We have to pause here for just a moment, but then I'll return directly with a conversation with the great Professor Anita Hill. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Anita Hill needs no introduction, but for those of you who have somehow been on Mars, I'll give a short one anyway. Anita Hill is a professor of social policy, law, and women's studies at Brandeis University and a faculty member of Brandeis Heller School for Social Policy and Management. She became a national figure in 1991 when she testified at the Senate confirmation hearing for U.S. Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas that he had sexually harassed her when he was her boss at the U.S. Department of Education and at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. In 1991, when Bush nominated Thomas, after the Senate confirmation hearings were initially completed with little opposition, a report of an interview of Hill by the FBI was leaked to the press. The hearings were reopened, and she was called to testify. She said that Thomas had sexually harassed her while he was her supervisor at the Department of Education and at the EEOC. After much debate, which was scurrilous in its anti-feminism and anti-woman bias, the Senate confirmed Thomas to the Supreme Court by a vote of 52 to 48. But Hill's testimony increased the public's awareness of sexual harassment. In addition, the manner in which the all-male, all-white Senate Judiciary Committee questioned Hill during her testimony is said to have inspired the record number of women who ran for office and were elected to Congress in 1992, the so-called Year of the Woman. She became a highly sought-after lecturer, speaking on racial and gender issues in the workplace. She's appeared on all national programs, including 60 Minutes, Face the Nation, and Meet the Press. She's published articles on civil rights issues in Newsweek and the New York Times, and has authored 2 books, Speaking Truth to Power and Reimagining Equality, Stories of Gender, Race, and Finding Home. She also served as the co-editor of Race, Gender, and Power in America, The Legacy of the Hill-Thomas Hearings. In 2017, the Me Too movement, #MeToo, brought renewed media attention to her, and the newly formed Commission on Sexual Harassment and Advancing Equality in the Workplace selected Hill to lead its efforts against sexual harassment in the entertainment industry. She returns to Women's Media Center Live as a frequent guest and a much, much beloved one. Anita, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live.
It is wonderful to be in conversation with you, always.
Well, I'm honored, truly. And it's a special treat that you're closing the season with your inimitable voice and manner and clarity. It's been a difficult season. I want to start, I think, by just asking you, given how polarized the country is, and given, oh my God, the court, and Roe, and guns, and the international scene, it's hard not to get depressed, although we can't afford to get depressed. What are your thoughts on any or all of that?
Well, the polarization, I think, is something that we hear about so often in the press. I mean, we talk about the great divisions that are in the country now, and we see the 2 emblems of the division, I think, as only political. One of the things, though, that really troubles me is that while we're focusing on the politics, what is happening is that the battles are being fought and often cases lost at the expense of the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that we see that we are likely going to have a restriction on rights, basic rights that we thought were already well earned and precedent, and whether it's rights, it's reproductive rights, or whether it is basic rights of equality whether we're talking about race or gender identity or sexuality.
Right.
Those are what seem to be up for grabs right now. And while we're focused on the politics, the Democrats versus the Republicans in this country, those rights are being eroded.
Yeah.
And we have got to refocus our attention to really understand that this is where we are right now, and that there needs to be a public outcry, because the losses will last us for decades and really generations, which is most important. It will affect our children and our children's children unless we respond right now to that crisis. The other thing that if people want to say, well, the sky is falling, you're just exaggerating this.
No, I don't think so.
Look at the rise in hate crimes. That's the first
Yeah.
indication of where we are, because the hate crimes really are about people pushing back on rights of marginalized communities,
That's right.
individuals, and this is not a place that we want to be in. It's not a world that we want to leave our children in.
Well, look at the hysteria, and I do use the word advisedly, over critical race theory. I mean, over books in the schools, the burning books. They're beginning to burn, so that that level of polarization. If I say the word systemic one more time, I think I will go mad. That gets completely lost in this rush to politics of politicizing everything, as if there were nothing beyond politics, nothing deeper, nothing more pervasive, nothing systemic, to be either affirmed or confronted. And it's enough to make you completely crazy. How do you not go crazy?
Well, I don't go crazy because I understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And we need our sanity. But one of the things that I think we have to start doing is, when we look at critical race theory and the attack on critical race theory, when we look on queer theory, and we look on what is happening with the books that reference sexuality, we have to call it what it is, for what it is. It is another form of violence. And we have not been very clear about that.
Ah, that's interesting. Say more.
Well, what I'm saying is, when you completely disaffirm someone's identity, it is an emotional violence that is being played against them. It creates the kind of harm that we read about from individuals, that we read about people who suffer because of their sexual identity, gay and queer children who are ostracized in their communities. There are lawsuits that are trying to correct this problem, but they do not go far enough. There's just not enough courts in the world to get their arms around this issue. But what we tend to think of as violence is physical violence, and that does exist. It does exist. But there's an emotional violence that we are neglecting. Yeah. And it is one of the reasons that we have such high rates of suicide ideation and suicide attempts among young children who are what we call sexual minorities, but who identify as either non-binary or queer or gay, and whatever they call themselves. We have a crisis there that is not caused by anything other than the social violence that they have experienced, trying to be who they are. Yeah. And I think we have a level of that in society. We have this tendency, and I write about it in my book, of negating the harm. And we are seeing this during this time of polarization, where people feel free to say obscene and destructive things. And we're seeing it escalated, and we need to be able to step up and identify it for what it is and the harm that it's causing.
Well, you saw some of the harm just a few days ago in in the hearings, which are giving me some heartening feeling. But at the testimony of two ordinary citizens, two women. Well, one testimony it was about her mother as much as herself. The Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who were the electoral worker, and the violence, yes, that was done to these lives.
Right.
Ordinary people doing their job, doing it well, had been doing it for years, no problems whatsoever, were continuing to do it with excellence, and their lives were all but destroyed. And I thought to myself, when the daughter at one point said she was listing all the things that had been done to her life, from the loss of reputation to you name it, and she also added in, and I gained 60 pounds, and I thought every woman is relating to that. I certainly am, as a form of invasive violence to her life. That's a different kind of violence.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, and we only recognize the broken bones and
That's right.
and the killings.
Yeah.
As violence,
yeah.
And that is where we're off track, and that is where I think we need to think differently as a public about it. There is the cultural problem that we as a culture only see violence in terms of its physical form.
That's right.
And even then we can excuse it. We use a whole bunch of explanations for it that don't really fit.
Mm.
But in the case of Ms. Moss, we had a systemic problem.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Now, and I saw it played out, in the hearings because we had the protections for elected officials. They have security. They have state security. They have bodyguards.
Right.
The workers,
forget about
everyday
it.
workers,
no.
do not have that. What they had was the FBI coming to their homes and saying, you're not safe here.
Yeah.
No one was reaching out to provide them safety and security.
Meanwhile, the powerful president of the United States, and the president of the United States was traducing them, was slandering them, was saying that they were hacks, that they were scam artists, and
behind that, Robin, we was again the cultural problem. Those were words that were pitted, against
coded
two Black women.
Yeah,
coded for race, coded for gender.
That's right.
And speaking to a base that was open to hearing that without any criticism at all and without any knowledge. Which gets us back to the critical race theory and what we're teaching in our schools.
That's right. Well, it's one of the
why it's so important.
This is one of the reasons Women's Media Center exists, to try and say, wait a minute, what about, and then whatever, fill in the blank, because it doesn't get said, it doesn't get followed up, the question, it doesn't get nailed on sex and on race, and particularly on sex and on race, and a lot of other things as well. But those are the deep systemic wounds that continue to fester.
It's culture built into our system.
Yeah, I know.
Because we know that those election workers are not going to be, high-paid people who can find their own safety. So the system just accepts that those people will be injured,
expendable,
and yes, they are expendable, and some have opted out of doing the work that needs to be done to protect our government,
right,
and our elective system.
She said that.
You asked me what I said I do to be hopeful.
Yes.
I'm
us.
hopeful because there is a resistance. Because there is a resistance to the effort to educate people and to let people know exactly where these behaviors and offenses are coming from. There is an effort to provide information that educates people about how we should be looking at these problems, not in isolation,
Right.
but really as part of our culture and part of our system, and it's ongoing. And I think we're raising a generation of young people who are smarter about these issues than my generation was, certainly than my generation was at the age that they are now.
Yeah.
And that is encouraging to me.
Well, it's also encouraging that they're working across the aisle, as it were. And I don't mean Republican, Democrat, but I mean there was a time, and I go back to the civil rights movement, there was a time when there was competition between oppressed peoples for who was, the oppression Olympics, and who had it worse and there was fighting over funding, and that is much less now. There is a real turning out for all causes and a working together, and intersectionality understood as the Venn diagram over which many, many, many things overlap. So I find that encouraging.
Well, you're so right about that, and part of that is political, because policy needs to be looked at. It's not just about changing culture.
No.
We need to change policy, and that coming together across populations occurred very early on in the Trump administration, where organizations that, as you say, may have in the past competed for funds,
right,
or competed for notoriety, or which was the most important to be addressed, have come together,
right,
and made a pledge that they would not be divided by the policies that were proposed during the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's not only that people are working together, there's an organized system for working together on these issues, whether it's raising public awareness or changing public policy. The work is going on.
Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right. That's very true, and that's the only thing that keeps me going, because I remind myself every day it's just Fannie Lou Hamer. You got to keep on keeping on. But it's difficult when the institutions themselves have been so corrupted. And institutions don't defend themselves. People defend institutions. And when you don't have people defending institutions, like the Republican Party up until, I can think until the current hearings, we didn't hear from Trumpist Republicans who've actually, a few of them, come forward and with great courage are testifying. I grant you that I have a very petty reaction sometimes in which I think, they're just doing their job. There's no reason to fall on the floor in a worshipful position, because they're just doing the damn job. And that would be true even of Liz Cheney. But the truth is, they do deserve some praise. It did cost them stuff. And I'm grateful for it. But we need more. We need just much, much, much more. And when the institutions begin to be so... I've been saturating myself in the framers who have good news and bad news. But where all of this stuff is concerned, it's basically pretty good news. And we've come a long way. We've come a very long way, and not so well. Not so well.
Well, but you talk about the institutions, and let's look at the courts, the federal courts, the Supreme Court, throughout. We know that there is a huge problem within our federal judicial system in terms of people having trust in the system, people having trust in the people who are serving it, who are on the court.
Right.
They have mistrust in the process for getting people on because that process has been corrupted.
Right.
And it's been corrupted in a number of ways. I don't have to get into all of them. But here's one area where I'm hopeful that people will start to see how important the courts are.
Yeah.
Not only in this sort of, high-level sense, but in their everyday lives.
Yes.
And how when other institutions fail in this country, in our system, the courts take over.
Right.
The courts pull, continue the support to build up the foundation of our democratic system.
That's right.
If that is not being experienced in the process for selecting the individuals who are on the court, then people don't trust the courts themselves.
Sure.
And so I think that we need to do more talking about what are we going to do about the court. Yes, we need to have legislation passed, but what are we going to do to encourage people that if legislation is passed and there are challenges, that you have a body with integrity that is going to hear those challenges and adjudicate fairly.
Because the feeling is not there at this point that that's the case.
It absolutely isn't. And we need to be up in arms about that.
Tell me, Anita, I didn't think of this until this very moment, so I didn't mean it as a trick trap question. And if you don't want to answer it, you do not have to. What do you think, just personally, and as a law professor as well, about the idea of expanding the court? Not that Biden would ever get push that through, but of expanding it so that its current incredible manipulated push to the right is a fairer balance, so that there are more members on the court. Do you think that that's crazy or impossible or doable or what?
Well, I think the goal is laudable. Yes, of course, we want greater balance.
Yeah.
But it seems to be sort of a temporary quick fix.
Uh-huh.
Because we know that if the legislative bodies change, even if the Senate changes and the president is a Republican, then the president might in fact end up changing the court again.
Right. So the court becomes a basketball.
It becomes a back and forth, all based on politics. So I'm not sure that the number is the significant part of what we should be concerned about. I've heard the arguments. I would love for there to be a possibility for a greater balance on the court. But let's assume that Joe Biden says, okay, we're now going to have 13 members of the court today. Do we think that the system for putting people on the court is fair enough that he will be able to create a majority of people who are thinking progressively about the role of the law?
No, not with the current Senate. No.
So
that's that takes care of that.
That's where that's my thinking about it. I don't mean to discourage about somebody else who is better versed
grasping at straws.
Something. Well, but somebody else may be able to think this through differently, come up with a way to do it. But I think what it does come down to is we need to fix the system for how we got to this imbalance.
Yeah, it's just that takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It took a long time to undo it, so it will take a long time to do it back up again. And I don't know that we have the time. It's a frightening time in this country, and every day, I mean, as more people run for office and get win their primaries, their scary primaries, saying straight out that they will not abide by election returns, you sort of look around you and you think, my God, how can, granted, the system was always democracy, that is, was always delicate. It was never, a given done deal. It was always, as the founders said, an experiment, a grand experiment. Right. And so it takes constant nourishing, like a garden. But when you see them being chipped away like that, and the court is the place of last resort, it's very scary, and it takes a long time to really right it from the ground up. You know what I mean?
The problem is not, and I'm going to end with this because I have to run.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
But the problem is not the time. The problem is the will. Do we have the will to confront it?
Well, you do, and I do. So there's two. There's two of us.
It doesn't take everybody.
We
It
can
just
start.
takes
We can damn well start there. Oh, I love you so much, Anita Hill, and I thank you for being you, and I thank you for coming back and doing the program again. And I hope you write lots more books and plant your wonderful thoughts in lots more students, because we need you for a long time here on this planet.
Well, thank you, and I plan to be here for a long time.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care, and you stay well and stay strong.
We need to pause here for one last break. But in the interstices between the end of the conversation with Anita and this moment, the news came down that Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court. Well, we expected this. And here we go. Now we have resolve and determination and political will indeed. And what's more, in a moment, we'll have some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Sometimes good news can actually be fighting words. Will. Political will. Anita Hill is right in pointing out that it's not so much time we need as will. Political will to get it done. I've always been a proponent of will, and have at times been accused of, or praised for, having a will of some certain ferocity, although history of late has at times made me feel like I have the will of a limp noodle. I don't believe in will indiscriminately, not against all comers and all odds, certainly not the triumph of it, and not as power over, but power to. I believe it can be mustered by ordinary humans like you and me, but it takes practice, endurance, and most of all, hope. So here are some random items I've plucked from the last few days of reporting to keep you going, even cheer you through the summer, and to remind us both that we can pivot from despair into something approaching hope. It's not that I'm turning mushily Hallmark card optimistic, You understand. But as former Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder of Colorado, a silver-tongued wit, often proclaimed, quote, "You can't wring your hands and roll up your sleeves at the same time." So for the purposes of demonstration, I'll call the initial reaction hand-wringing position and the pivoted position rolling up one's sleeves. For example, the hand-wringing position. Oh my God, people are being massacred all over the damn world and the country, and by the damn gun lobby is involved, and the NRA, and we're still not doing anything about it because of politicians' cowardice. The rolling up one's sleeves position. The Senate has finally come to an agreement on gun legislation. It ain't perfect. It ain't what we want. It ain't what they want either. But it is the beginning, and it will save lives because it includes the so-called violent boyfriend clause. Handwringer. Bill Cosby got out of jail. Oh, hell, how depressing that now he's free after all he did to women. The rolling up one's sleeves position. A jury in California found that Bill Cosby sexually assaulted a 16-year-old girl back in 1975 and just awarded her $500,000 in damages. The verdict was a setback for Cosby, who, on his release after serving nearly 3 years in prison, had promoted the appeals court decision as a full exoneration, a rather wild overstatement, now well overshadowed by a finding that reinforces the image of him as a man wielding his celebrity to take advantage of women. Besides, he's been publicly humiliated, his career is kaput, and his fortune has been shriveled. Dwell instead on Harvey Weinstein, who still languishes in jail. Hand-wringer. COVID and the hearings and this fascism rising in the country, it has left me such a nervous wreck I suddenly want to smoke again. Rolling sleeves. The FDA is set to propose a reduction of nicotine in cigarettes to help prevent addiction. It's likely to face fierce industry opposition, you think? But ha! Hand-wringer. What in God's name is wrong with Merrick Garland? The Justice Department is moving at a glacial pace on absolutely everything. Get with it. Rolling sleeves. The Justice Department has expanded its January 6th probe with fresh subpoenas, and increased public pressure from House committee hearings has created that. Action. Yeah. Federal agents dropped subpoenas on people in at least 2 states in what appeared to be a widening probe of how political activists supporting Donald Trump tried to use invalid electors to thwart Biden's 2020 electoral victory. And they're getting search warrants and raiding bad guys' homes. The hearings are really beginning to do the job. Hand-wringer. The court finally drops its dreaded Roe v. Wade decision on us. Rolling up sleeves. Listen, we expected this. We've been preparing for this, and we are ready for this. We're also outraged, enraged, ready to commit massive civil disobedience if necessary, and absolutely determined to prevail in all the multiple ways we've already laid out and will again. From new legislation to menstrual extraction kits, from court challenges to fundraising aid for poor women who can't afford to travel or pay for babysitters, from morning after to weeks after pills, from legal aid to pharmaceuticals sent by mail. We waste no time. We call on Congress to pass immediately the Women's Health Protection Act to restore protections for abortion nationwide. And there is a basic constitutional change in the offing, if we get behind it and push. Passage of the Equal Rights Amendment would totally negate the court's decision. Look, they want us to despair. We will not give them that desire. Hand-wringer. OMG, Trump could run and even win again, given all the gerrymandering and the outright lies. This is like Germany in the early 1930s. I smell fascism rising all around. Rolling up sleeves. Then stop it in its tracks. Remember that we had never seen fascism per se before it was suddenly upon us in World War II. Well, we've seen it now. And we know what it smells like. So get going. Get to work. Think of all the decent people working in both visible and invisible ways, in front of and behind the scenes, to preserve and protect our democracy. Hand-wringer. Oh, young people these days, they don't know what they're doing. Rolling up sleeves. Bugger off. Young people might trip over their excessive pronouns on the way to their active verbs, but they're still the hope of the world. So are you, by the way. What's more, you're younger than you think. So get with the program. No time for depression or fear or exhaustion. Rest for a little bit, then it's back to the front with renewed energy. Political will is the bright side. And through it all, have one hell of a great summer. See you in September. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor Regina K. Scully, WMC president and co-executive producer of this program Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.